Hey, so I wanted to quickly talk about two biases you should probably know about. Most basically every LLM has this. And part of it is like prompting, some of it is just how these systems are set up. But there is kind of a default bias that often gets ignored that causes a lot of problems. So, for example, if I were to talk about, let's say, write a PRD about a search bar, there's probably two biases that it's going to have here. The first is that it often relies on positivity as its initial take. So if you were to ask it something critical about a feature or product or customer feedback, you'll often get a very positive response. So, generally customers like this, but they did say this. Generally customers like this, but they did say that. You'll kind of get this back and forth where it always, even if you ask it explicitly for something positive, it will usually, or something just like unbiased and negative, it will usually still give you some positive thing. The second is it is quite lazy and it doesn't always have the best intentions in mind when it's trying to be thoughtful through things. So you'll often see things grouped in twos or threes. Depends on how long the document. If it needs to go over lots of content, you'll often see things grouped in twos. If it is able to have quite a short document, you'll often see things grouped in threes. And you'll see that very evidently here. Obviously, the approvals, there are 3 approvals, 2 risk management, 2 dependencies, 3 success metrics, 3 milestones, 3 requirements. And of course, like every single subsection has like 3, 2, 2, 3 of 2, 3 of 2. And it doesn't ask you follow-up questions. So you'll see here, I said, write a PRD about a search, and it just went. It didn't ask for clarifying questions, what type of search, what type of capabilities of search, what were maybe some problems or issues that we're trying to resolve with this search. Is there customer feedback that we want to ingest with this search? Doesn't ask you anything. So it has those kind of 2 core biases, which is everything's going to be something focused on positivity. And I'll kind of try and replicate an example here. And then the second is it often groups things in 2s and 3s. Now, the groupings of 2s and 3s generally is fine, but what you often lose is that if you're trying to have it write a document or go through a lot of data, you might lose something because you didn't realize that if you said, give me all the feedback that customer said, and then it will give you 3 pieces of feedback the customer says. And you might think in that moment, oh, that must be it. But the reality is it just kind of stops. It's quite lazy and will kind of stop at 2 or 3. The same problem, you'll see this with any model, whether it's 4.0, o1, Anthropic, Claude, Gemini. It really kind of has a bias towards 2s and 3s. I'm not quite sure why this is. There's obvious reasons of why it has context limits. So, it will only generate so many tokens per response. And those are set by the models themselves. And some tools can exceed those or kind of have different ways of expanding on those. But generally speaking, you can only get like let's say 2,000 to 4,000 tokens in a response on a public model. But this is not anywhere near 4,000 tokens. I mean, this is maybe 150 tokens, 200 tokens, maybe even 500 at most. So it's quite low. So I don't quite know why. I think maybe there is a standard prompt in here that's saying, hey, be concise, be clear, you're here to be helpful. And it interprets that as being a little bit more concise, a little bit more short. In its speak and its ability to kind of think through problems. If I were to say, what are the top or what are the worst things America did in 2010? Like, let's just pick a random year. You'll see that oftentimes it doesn't really lean into a lot of negativity. So you'll see here what happened. So quite an unbiased view, Americans' responsibility, what happened, Americans' responsibility, what happened, criticism and stuff like that. Generally speaking, this is like fairly unbiased. And I think there's a lot of prompting that goes into this. What is worst, I think oftentimes even here, let's say, be interpreted in various ways, including poor political decisions, social behaviors, environmental impact. And you see how it kind of chose maybe what the worst was by maybe oil spill, maybe more of a social obligation rather than a political one or an environmental impact. So there's a lot of these things that like you'll just start seeing its bias towards positivity over negativity. Like this is honestly a good example of it kind of biasing towards not just positivity, not just trying to pick things that might be less confrontational or less subjective. And also it might bias towards specific things that are non-political. So there are political stuff here, but it didn't pick that as the first one. It kind of picked something that was less confrontational. So oftentimes you'll see this when there can be more subjective data. So let's say you pull in a Google search, or you're doing like a search on top of this data. That's when you'll start seeing a lot of this bias go away when it comes to positivity. But you'll still see, sections of 2, sections of 2, sections of 2. And why did it end at 7? Was there only 7 bad things? Why not end at 10? Why not end at 3? Why not end at 20? So you'll see kind of this bias towards, okay, I think that this is good enough for a specific thing. If I were to say, what could I be doing better in life? Let's just ask like a more subjective thing. Evaluate your health, physical health. Again, we're probably going to get categories of 2. There's obviously not just mental and physical, but even so, categories of 2, categories of 2, categories of 2, networking. Again, so you just kind of see this bias. You'll see this bias a lot. And what it means is you often just have to push it. You have to ask it, can you give me more options? Can you not give me lists of 3? Just go until you're done. Can you continue and exhaust this list until you've completed everything? There's a lot of ways of kind of going around this bias. So for example, if this was a legitimate question, I would say, so for some reason it keeps ending at 7. So it's having a bias of list towards 7. That could be a prompt related thing. It could be a lot of reasons, could be a context limit thing. And it still has that bias towards 2. So what I might say here is like, continue until you feel the list is exhaustive. And this can be an easy way of just like having it continue to go until you actually feel like it's done. Same thing with some of the groups of 3s, like don't group things in 2s of 3s. You can be a little more explicit with this one, kind of get some specific responses. I generally will prompt things out of positivity. So don't focus on the positivity. Don't try and give a positive answer. Be curious, ask questions, reflect. If you're unclear about something, respond. There are tools like Build Better that we've already prompted this into a lot of these systems. So it'll ask you clarifying questions. It doesn't have a bias towards positivity as often as you would often see. It doesn't have a bias towards groups of 2s and 3s. It does a much better job at writing documents more extensively that doesn't just stop when it feels like, okay, I've kind of hit a word limit that feels comfortable or something like that. So there are a lot of tools that default kind of take this prompting out, and there's a lot of ways that you can prompt getting this stuff out of it. But I just wanted to talk about this because the bias towards positivity, the bias towards groupings of 2s and 3s can come in pretty extensively, and you can feel that impact in a lot of the documents it writes, a lot of the things that it writes, where it just starts consolidating, starts being more concise than you want it to be. And oftentimes you can kind of prompt it out of here. So as you see here, now I'm at 22. And that's way more than 7 more. So I got even more than 7 the second time around. But you can see how this kind of bias happens. And if I wanted to expand on any of these things, I can ask, okay, can you expand 21 to more than 2 or 3 sections, and really just kind of go from there. Just something I wanted to talk about, and hopefully this is helpful as you start writing documents, as you start asking and working with ChatGPT and other models. Knowing this type of information around its bias towards positivity, its bias towards conciseness, its bias towards 2s and 3s can really help improve a lot of your prompting, a lot of the outcomes that you get from it, so it doesn't get lazy on you and it keeps going. And again, I've seen this on every model, O1, O1 Pro, Anthropic, Grok, you name it, everything seems to have this bias. But talk to you later.